All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first panel today on the sustainability of protein, revolutionizing the way we eat. My name is Omika Jakaria, and I am a first-year MBA student at Tuck, and I'm joined here by three fantastic panelists who I will introduce now. So first, we have Christie Lagally of Rebellyous Foods. Christie is the founder and CEO of Rebellyous. She is a mechanical engineer with nearly 20 years of engineering experience and a holder of 5 patents in manufacturing technology. She spent much of her career in the aerospace industry, working on commercial airplanes and spacecraft in testing, design, and manufacturing. And in 2017, she founded Rebellyous Foods, a production technology company to accelerate production of plant-based meat production to compete one-on-one with animal meat on cost, volume, and quality. So thank you, Christie, for joining us. We have Benjamina Bollag from Higher Steaks. Benjamina is the founder and CEO of Higher Steaks, a cultivated meat company based in the UK. Previously, Benjamina co-founded a London-based B2B electronics company selling to FTSE 500 companies. Benjamina has also worked at an Israeli 3D printing company, at the digital marketing division of PepsiCo's joint venture with Strauss, and was the lead developer at an edtech startup. And Benjamina holds a Master of Chemical Engineering from the Imperial College. And finally, we have Krijn Nood of Meatable. Krijn is the CEO and founder of Meatable. His leadership is really unique, in fact, as he is one of the first or few non-scientist CEOs in the cultivated meat space. And previously, he was a strategy consultant at McKinsey, and he is currently based in the Netherlands. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us. Now I'll just have all of our panelists give us a brief overview of what their company does. So we'll start with Christie.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Again, I'm Christie Lagally. I'm the founder and CEO of Rebellyous Foods. At Rebellyous, we make delicious, juicy, and affordable plant-based chicken products for the food service market and soon to be the consumer packaged goods market. Our goal is to make plant-based meat democratized, essentially available and affordable for everyone. As a result, behind the scenes, we develop and implement new novel production equipment that dramatically brings down the costs and scales up the volumes of plant-based meat production so that we can truly attain cost competitive and volume competitiveness with the chicken industry. At Rebellyous, we sell directly to distributors and restaurants as well as grocery stores. We don't sell direct to consumer, but we are a manufacturing company that runs a 21,000 square foot food production facility in West Seattle.
Great, thank you, Christie. Benjamina, could you give us a little overview of Higher Steaks?
Yeah, so Higher Steaks is a cultivated meat company. For those of you who don't know what that is essentially we take a small sample of cells from the animal, which we expand and differentiate to make muscle, fat, and all the components that make meat so that we can create meat that's exactly the same, but without all the negative consequences that come with conventional production. We're focused on pork as a first product, and the differentiation is really in having the most efficient non-genetically engineered method to get to that meat.
Great, thank you. And finally, Krijn, could you talk a little bit about Meatable?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Omika, thanks for having me and having us. Very excited to be on the panel. So we at Meatable also work in the cultivated meat space. As Benjamina explained the concept, we are based in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is pretty uniquely positioned, in my opinion, for the field, because you have Wageningen, which is like the best agriculture university in the world. You have Leiden, which is really big on biotech, and then you have where we are based in Delft, in the technical engineering field. We are currently a team of about 20 scientists, engineers, and are now sort of moving towards food scientists and food technologists as well. And it's an exciting year for us, 2020, because we later in the year will be presenting our first prototype product, which in our case will be a pork prototype product.
Great, thank you. Yeah, very interesting companies from all of you, and really excited to learn more about the work that you've been doing. So I have some questions that I want to ask, and then if we have time towards the end of the panel, we'll open it up to the audience. So please keep your questions in mind, and hopefully we'll get to them. My first question is for Krijn. How have you approached consumer acceptance of your product? So given that this is kind of a new product in a new space, how have you approached consumer acceptance?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the thing with our product, of course, with cultivated meat, is that there's no product on the market yet. So to that extent, it's difficult to really gauge consumer acceptance. But there is a lot of research, and what we have found is if you focus on the why more than on the how, that does a world of change to consumer acceptance. So if you really focus on the production way, then you get sort of lower acceptance rate than if you focus on, hey, it's actually, that's also how we internally tell the story. It's exactly the same product. We've just sort of updated the way it's being produced, and it doesn't have all the negative side effects of having to rear all the animals, greenhouse gas emission, land use, water use. So sort of really focusing on that why it works very well with consumer acceptance. And then second point to the question, which is very interesting. So actually recently there was a study that was published where and it's a little bit cheeky, but the researchers basically had 200 people in a room, and they said, here's a cultivated meat hamburger. It actually wasn't. It was a regular hamburger. And they just sort of told them that it was, and they sort of tested the consumer willingness. And actually, I believe it's a pretty bizarre number. Like 193 out of 200 participants actually tasted it, and I believe like 40% actually thought it tasted better than a regular hamburger, which is odd because it was a regular hamburger. And the psychology apparently behind that is that because you sort of feel that that you're doing something good, that actually makes the product tastier. So overall, I'm pretty positive about once it is in the store that will have a big consumer base that wants to try it.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like that's definitely the right approach, and there are unique challenges that come with trying something new, but it's probably worth it in the end. Kind of going along the same lines of cultivated meat, I want to ask Benjamina how you at Higher Stakes chose pork as your first product that you wanted to focus on.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. One of them is it's the most widely consumed meat, so often people don't realize that, but the pork consumption is really massive. On that, there's one of the biggest issues that is one of the biggest reasons as well that I started this company is the antibiotic resistance issue. And antibiotics are most widely used in pork products. We also have a problem at the moment with the African swine fever. So there's really a shortage in the sense that the demand is really shooting up, but the supply is under significant threat because pretty much a quarter of China's pig production is dead. And then it's already hit about 10 countries in Europe. On top of that, there's a lot of products that we can choose from. So when we look at cultivated meat, we'll probably start with the more processed products. And when you look at pork, even when you look at bacon, it's much easier to make a piece of bacon than it is to make a full like Wagyu steak. So there's a much wider variety of products we can choose from. And one that sounds gross, but is helpful, is that it's most similar to human. And obviously most of the research is done in the biotech field. So the closer it is, actually, the easier it is for us to adapt the protocols. And because our genome is quite close to the pork, it will be easier than with some of the other animals. And I think we're seeing as well in terms of the market of pork, because of the shortages and all of that, a lot more people moving towards that market, including, Meatable, but also, Impossible Foods that now launch pork. And I think, it will be really important to address that.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Christie, I want to kind of turn our attention a little bit to the plant-based side of things, and I'm curious to know from your experience, what are some of the major barriers for plant-based meat companies to scale up production?
Yeah, so there are obviously a lot of plant-based meat companies and have been I wouldn't say there have been a lot for a long time, but there are a lot right now. And there are obviously some bigger players who are definitely scaling up plant-based meat. We've actually been making plant-based meat. The US has been making plant-based meat for about 120 years when it was first commercialized in 1899. So the fact that the industry is actually still quite small is an indication about a little bit about how and why it's difficult to scale up. So just to give you a level setting, in the US, at the end of 2020, we're expected to reach 108 billion pounds of animal-based meat in the United States alone. And yet the plant-based meat industry barely even tops 0.5%, or even closer to about 1/5 of that volume by essentially poundage. Essentially, it's like, it's not volume, but by weight. And as a result, the amount of plant-based meat that's available to the world right now, or even to the US market, is minuscule compared to how much animal-based meat there is to compensate for if we're really to take down our meat production for human health, animal welfare, climate change, and now pandemic prevention reasons. So this is a really, really important issue to scale this up quickly. But the major problems are that we fundamentally just don't have the right technology to be doing plant-based meat production at scale. We have some of the technology, we just don't have all of it. If you look at a chicken processing facility where we basically just process one type of white broiler chicken, the automation and scaling capability is mind-boggling. All of the equipment is custom designed to the bodies of the chicken. All of the processes are heavily automated. All the conveyance of material is specific to the type of chicken, or to the chicken itself and the process at which it's going through. All the workers are slotted in there to be just as highly efficient as possible. We really don't have anything like that in the plant-based foods world. And so as a result, what you get is when you try to scale plant-based meat, you get quality issues, you get heat and mass transfer problems, you get heating issues within the material. You also have a heavy material transfer at all states of the manufacturing process that can slow things down. Oftentimes you don't have kind of the tools you need essentially to make plant-based meat at scale. So what we're doing at Rebellyous Foods is we essentially went back to the drawing board and said, what are the fundamental principles that need to happen to make plant-based meat really high quality, really scalable at quality at scale, meaning that the physics that occur when you make plant-based meat at the batch scale or the bench scale really needs to translate to the physics that happen at scaled production. And so what we did is we essentially figured that out and really documented the major problems. And there was just literally no end to problems, whether they be heating and cooling issues, over processing issues that can make the material of plant-based meat tough, flavor degradation issues from heating and cooling the product in the wrong way, or even storing the product in the wrong way. So there's a lot of really interesting things that we should be doing very, very differently in the plant-based foods world. And that's what we do at Rebellyous. We design novel production equipment that implement the physics, the first principle physics on these materials, so that when you scale these tools, they actually make the same high quality plant-based meat that those of us who have enjoyed these products for a long time are used to. But now we can make them, at the 1 billion level, 2 billion pounds, hopefully 100 billion pounds in the very near future.
Great, that's really exciting. It sounds like something that definitely needs to happen. So it's great to hear that you're trailblazing that work in this space. So Christie, you mentioned a little bit about kind of addressing this pandemic situation. So I wanted to shift our focus to the current climate in the world and want to hear from all of you how COVID-19 and this situation has impacted your business. So feel free to focus on production, distribution, consumer demand, really anything that you feel is relevant, how COVID-19 has impacted your business. So maybe we can start with Benjamina for this one.
Sure. So on our end, the biggest impact has been that our labs have shut. So because it's not counted as essential work, essentially our labs have at the moment shut. But I think the positive of it is that it really gave time to review our work and improve our work and start thinking more about all of the issues essentially that we'll also face as we scale. So when we look at what Christie just said around plant-based and think about we're not even at production scale, so all of these issues are things that we'll probably face as well, and how we can start thinking about those and address them in the right way. So it's a good time as well to take a step back in a way, and really think about that more deeply. I think on the even more positive side, it's really getting people to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and I think getting people to understand that actually diseases that are in animals can come to humans, and a lot of them as often come from the meat production. And this is something that I guess pushed the three of us, right? And is getting people to understand why we're doing what we're doing and how it will affect every single person on this planet. So
great, yeah. Thank you. Krijn, do you want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on Meatable?
Yeah, no, and I really agree with everything that Benjamina said, and I sort of always look at three groups. So you sort of have your end consumers, you have sort of regulators, politicians, sort of that group that sort of is a stakeholder, but that can make a lot happen if they sort of see the need and see the urgency, and then you have your investors, which for us, given it's a pretty capital intensive thing we're trying to do, sort of those three. And I think for consumers, it's a re-emphasis or it's an additional benefit, and it's a renewed realization that indeed, like Benjamina said, there is downsides to essentially slaughtering. I think it's like 70 billion land animals a year, right? And that it's sort of that there's that's not a sustainable solution. And I think this pandemic makes it very real and very tangible. So I would say that's a sort of a blessing in disguise. I think regulators, it's similar, and then investors, I would say as well. I would love to see if they also really walk the walk, but I do get sort of a lot of encouraging emails like, hey, it's so important what you guys are doing, keep it going, it shows it's so important. So I think overall, for us, that's sort of the positive about it. And luckily we have a little bit more of a flexible government, I think. So we are sort of still open and operational. So I think for our business, it's also not that heavily impacted.
Great. And Christie, do you have anything to add from your end on how COVID-19 has impacted your business?
Yeah, we really ran the gambit when it comes to the impact on our business. On one hand, we are a food production facility that was serving the food service market exclusively. So our clients were universities, corporate cafeterias, dorms, schools, colleges, and ballparks, where they were, enjoying nuggets for soccer games and baseball games. And unfortunately, all of that got shut down, in Seattle pretty early, as one of the first cities in the United States that really got hit hard by COVID-19. So obviously that was really difficult. However, we were considered an essential facility, so we did stay up and running with careful social distancing procedures and extra sanitation procedures in place. We don't have a lot of people in our facility because so much of it either automated or happening at a small scale, because we're still very early stage and we're doing mostly research and development. So we continued being able to do production under safe conditions and masked conditions and things like that. But I think really where COVID-19 primarily impacted our company was just that the issue of bird flu in the United States and elsewhere in the world was kind of the quiet, silent issue that was happening all along since January and even December. Around the world, we continue to see heavy-duty hotspots of bird flu, both in Europe, in the Baltic states, as well as in the United States, where low pathogenic bird flu was mutating to high pathogenic bird flu right in the middle of COVID-19. And it barely made the news, but it's a really serious threat. Bird flu, when it jumps to humans, can have a 50 to 60% mortality rate. And it's a very, very dangerous situation. So obviously, one of the things that really was motivating to me and my team was that one of the things that we work on is not just new production equipment, but the plans to actually convert production facilities doing chicken processing into plant-based meat processing by replacing some but not all the equipment. And by doing so, we can offer plans to the chicken industry that could make their facilities, 2 to 3 times more profitable by using those facilities to make plant-based meat, chicken products instead of animal-based meat products, and thereby offering, everything from better working conditions to certainly better products to the world. So our efforts to really to provide a solution, not to just to consumers, but to the chicken industry in general, was really, really amped up by the fact that, obviously nobody wanted this to happen, and Seattle was obviously hit very hard by COVID-19. But at the same time, it really brought front and center how necessary it is for us to accelerate our efforts. And as a result, for those of you looking for opportunities, we are hiring 4 engineers right now for our engineering team to do facility design, equipment design, prototyping, design of engineering, testing, things like that.
Christie, can I ask you one question? Because I think in Europe it's less so, but I see a lot of news coverage on sort of slaughterhouses closing down, and I think it's a big thing in the US. Is that also on the sort of chicken side? Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yes, chicken processing is done in a couple of different ways, but it has been hit very, very hard by COVID-19. Very, very intense outbreaks have happened at chicken processing facilities. It's not unique, I would say, to chicken processing facilities, but if you think about the way that chicken versus pigs versus cows are slaughtered, the highest concentration of workers is in the chicken processing, where you're literally standing shoulder to shoulder with the person next to you to do one small cutting of chickens that are going by at literally hundreds of thousands a day, if not a couple million a day per facility. So obviously that's the case. It's almost just as intense in pig processing and pork processing, but there is a little more automation in those facilities that can do some of the close contact work. That being said, all of the facilities that are processing meat, whether it be from slaughter all the way to processing or even just processing, are definitely obviously at risk if we can't take more measures to protect workers.
Yeah, well, thank you all for sharing. It sounds like obviously this is not a great situation for the world, but it's brought to light why your companies are doing what they do and why we need to kind of change the way we're eating. So we actually have a question from the audience that I wanted to ask. And the question is, at what point will cultivated meats be cost competitive with conventional meats or plant-based alternatives? So maybe either Benjamina or Krijn, if you want to take that, and then the other can jump in.
I can start. So the first thing is depends on what you count as cost competitive, right? Because meat itself has many different price points. Organic meat isn't the same as the cheapest meat that you can find. Steak won't be the same as a sausage. So I think you'll start seeing products that are cost competitive with the highest and maybe in a 30-40% difference with the higher ends of meat in about 3 years. But to really get to the cheapest meat, it will take slightly more time. We will get there, and I think on the long we could be even cheaper. But it will take some time. In 3 years you won't see I don't think we'll see our steak for $1, right? It will take some time to get to the cheapest of it. I don't know if Krijn want to add anything.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it's also to Christie's point earlier on scale, right? It's all in scale, and then I indeed agree. Like in theory, we should be able to go below because it's actually not efficient to sort of have a cow live and consume nutrients for 3 years, keep the body at 37 degrees, and then only use part for the meat, right? So it's once I think we've scaled up the supply chain, once we've made the processes more efficient, and it's really only about sort of the nutrients that are required to build up the proteins and the fat, we should be able to go under the price of conventional meat.
And I think to add to that, I think to actually be able to go that step further, it's really going to be about creating the supply chain, and potentially, loads of new companies actually stepping up and helping on those, on those nutrients, on creating new machinery that's better at automation, that addresses all the tiny challenges. Because yes, maybe we'll be able to get to some point, with what's today, but to really take it a step further, I think we will need a lot of tiny innovations, and that will help this be a more efficient process.
Yeah.
If I could chime,
go ahead.
Can I chime in there as well? I'm so hopeful about cultured meat and cell-based meat, because I think it definitely is an important part of our long-term meat replacement future. I hope there's a time when, obviously we have plant-based and cell-cultured meat at the same time, but I really do believe most of the world will really look to cultured meat as a really important part of their diet. So I'm really hopeful about that. One of the other things that I'm really hopeful is that someday there will also be like hybrids of plant-based and cultured meat, so that, it can actually start to maybe bridge the gap a little between cost and the plant-based meat versus cost of cultured meat. And at that same level, obviously, we still have some work to do to bring down the cost of plant-based meat. But at the same time, I'm really hopeful that these industries can really be one industry and work together to bring down those costs and make them available to the whole world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way to frame it for the longer term. And yeah, to the audience, thank you for continuing to submit questions. If you still have some, we can fit in a few more. I wanted to shift our focus a little bit to the business side of things. So we received a question here around a lot of the startups in this space starting with the retail or business to consumer type of strategy, whereas some of the bigger plant-based alternatives like Beyond and Impossible were very successful at setting B2B partnerships and then leveraging that in the retail space. So maybe Christie, if you could talk a little bit about how you've thought through your initial strategy and then things that you're thinking about for the future in terms of B2B versus B2C.
Yeah, so we have up until now done primarily done B2B, but because of COVID-19 are quickly pivoting to B2C, or maybe not direct to consumer, but going to grocery as an opportunity to replace the revenue that is naturally lost as a result of shutting down every major food service operation. But at the same time, we do still believe that it's a long-term strategy for replacing chicken on a large scale is our ability to serve the food service market. There's a couple of reasons for that. In the United States, almost half of all the meat we eat is chicken. And about half of all that chicken, in fact, actually a little more than half, is bread battered fried chicken products such as chicken nuggets, patties, and strips. So think of all of the chicken that you eat at your fast food restaurants, at your local cafeteria, at your school lunch program. Chicken is usually chicken patties or chicken strips or chicken nuggets are usually on the menu at a school all across the US and probably around the world as well, at least 2 to 3 times a week. Sometimes, obviously 2 to 3 times is almost every day. But so that's a lot of plant-based, or that's a lot of processed chicken products. When we were looking at the best way to tackle this market, if you're going to go for a lower price point, you have to go for a higher volume, because that's where we essentially can make the income in, is being able to sell high volumes. And so selling into schools and hospitals and universities and dorms and corporate cafeterias and ballparks seemed to be a natural solution to the fact that we were focusing on the super hard, low cost product of chicken. Chicken is so efficient and it is such a low cost meat. that in order to compete with it with ingredient costs that are usually about 130% higher than the ingredient costs of an animal-based chicken product, plant-based chicken products, we knew we had to sell them at high volume and, of course, bring manufacturing costs down, which was, of course, the thesis of our company. But it seemed like a natural fit. And we really felt like, cafeterias, hospitals, universities, corporate cafeterias, places like that, have kind of a forward-thinking view on offering meat that's better for you. Places like some of our first customers was Swedish Hospital here in Seattle. It's a cardiac care hospital, and they care a lot about what people are consuming, no matter if they're patients or not. And so getting a no cholesterol food, including the Impossible Burger and other plant-based meat, but obviously including Rebellyous, was really important to them so that they could offer their customers something that was in step with the advice that they were giving people to reduce their meat consumption, avoid cholesterol, avoid saturated or lower their saturated fat and sodium. So all of those things were consistent with the values of food service agencies that were looking to do things better for the environment, better for their clients, and better for their animal welfare interests as well. So that seemed like a good fit from that perspective, both from the enormous size of the U.S. chicken market, as well as the enormous size of the food service market that is selling chicken products.
Great, thank you for speaking about that. So another question from the audience is around one of the key challenges facing cultivated meat being access to growth factors. So what does the supply chain look like for accessing non-animal derived growth factors? And do you see this as a key hurdle to overcome? And I would throw that to Benjamina or Krijn, so maybe Benjamina, if you want to address that.
Yeah, sure. So we only use one growth factor, so that makes it easier for us. But yeah, for that one growth factors, there's a couple of companies working on it that we're confident will find a solution. It's again talking about the supply chain, so this is not something that we're specifically looking at because we're only using one of them. But yeah, I don't know if Krijn maybe might be a better fit.
I think there's a couple of avenues that we are as Meatable are going. So one is indeed sort of figuring out low cost production method or low cost producers, and one of the reasons why it's so expensive is because of the high purity and the very low volumes. So that sort of should be solved if the demand is increasing. Secondly is reducing the reliance. So just reducing the, through sort of optimization of the cell lines, reducing the reliance. And then at Meatable, we're also working on getting a alternative, and that's sort of as far as I can go without my IP lawyers getting angry on sort of another avenue to sort of replace them altogether.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear. My next question is for Christie, again, from the audience. So when you're thinking about scaling production, also wanted to hear a little bit about how you're thinking about the health and quality of your products. So do you think it's possible to make some of these products low sodium, low fat, more lean than existing products on the market, and how you prioritize that compared to other things that you're looking at?
Yeah, so Rebellyous actually makes a wide variety of plant-based chicken products, not just different forms and shapes, but also different, like there's a million different ways to make a nugget. So you can make it, flavorful, you can put, pepper and things in it. You can have different, outer crusts, different breadings and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that meet the variety of different needs, because we not only offer, we don't just offer one product. We offer a product that people can obviously buy in the grocery store, and then we offer products that they can offer a variety of different products. I got so excited about the products, I forgot the question. Can you tell me what it was again?
The question is around the health impacts of...
Oh, yes, the health impacts. That's why I was going there. At any rate, so what that means is that we can tailor a product for a particular market say, the K through 12 school market so that it meets the nutritional requirements of that particular market. So for example, our K through 12 school nugget meets all of the criteria for the National School Lunch Program and can be used as a product for reduced and low income lunches at schools. So that's a big win for us in that it meets those nutritional requirements. Our Rebellyous nugget, which is a nugget that we've been selling into institutions for a while and will also be selling for a limited time in our consumer packaged goods in just a few weeks, actually has considerably less sodium and saturated fat than an animal-based chicken nugget. Obviously has no sodium, for obvious reasons, no antibiotics. We don't really need to give antibiotics to the soybeans. And so as a result, we can definitely make better for you products. We could also make not so better for you products. If you're looking for something really, really decadent, and that's possible too. And that's what's really exciting about this new world of meat, whether it be cultured meat or plant-based meat. The limitations of the meat industry are something we don't really talk that much about, but you can't really change when you're, producing, you're farming over, 99 billion chickens in the United States every single year, and they're all the same kind. You don't really have a whole lot of ability to change anything about that material, which is like chicken muscle, right? But not it to make it so it's nutritionally relevant to the market that we're sending it to. It's another reason that we don't just sell one product. We know that chicken serves a variety of needs in the United States, whether it be a low-cost lunch for the National School Lunch Program, or one of the other things we do is develop products behind the scenes confidentially for fast food companies. And we're currently working with 3 fast food companies to develop really decadent products that people will really, really enjoy. And that versatility to not only make those variety of products, but also make them soon to be at a very low cost through our manufacturing technology is really how we're addressing not just the need for these products, but also the nutritional requirements that a lot of different parties have different needs.
Great, thank you for sharing. So we're actually at time and we have to move on to our next session, but thank you all so much for being our panelists. Christie, Krijn, and Benjamina, really enjoyed having you. And it was great to hear about everything that you're working on. And it sounds like you're addressing really important challenges related to sustainability, ethics, health, all of it. So it feels very topical to be speaking to you. I just want to plug to the audience, if you're active on social media, we encourage you to follow our Twitter and Instagram at Virtual Summit AT and use the hashtags TUGAgTechSummit and hashtag TUGAgTech. So we hope to hear from you there. And the next session will be on breakthroughs in protein. So that's going to be focused on more of the science aspect of this space. So we encourage you to stick around if you can. And thank you all again for joining, and hope you stick around. Thank you.
Thanks, Omega.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.